How do you read the Bible? I'm just gonna be honest for a second and just throw this out there that this thing is intimidating. It's huge, it's heavy, thousands and thousands of pages, no pictures. It's intimidating. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it makes sense. It seems outdated, it is written in sometimes different cultural contexts, and it's hard to make heads or tails sometimes of it. So this is what we're gonna talk about on this edition of Hashtags, is how to read the Bible from one of my favorite spots here in McCandless, Convive Coffee. So I'm here on a beautiful Wednesday morning at Convive Coffee, where I can't tell you how many guys I have met here on a morning just like this to start talking about the Bible. And most guys are intimidated. Most guys have no idea how to approach the Bible, how to read it, how to gain any kind of meaning or perspective out of it. And so every time I meet with a guy, when I begin to start discipling them or mentoring them in some way, I go over an overview of the Bible to help them understand the broader story, the meta narrative, or the big story, the big narrative, overarching narrative of the Bible. And it helps a lot to gain perspective on how to read the Bible, because then as you get into the minutia of the Bible and the individual stories, they begin to take greater meaning and shape and color and texture within the context of the broader story. In my previous post, I posted it about what the Avengers, the movie series, can teach us about the Bible. And this week, I want to talk about how to read the Bible. And I'm going to focus in on the big picture. That's funny because it's not micro, it's anyway, you get it. So I'm going to focus in on the meta narrative, the bigger picture of the Bible. And I'm going to do this just like I'm sitting here at a coffee shop outside, as I would with any other guy I'm meeting with. And except I'm going to use some graphics that I came up with to help illustrate what I'm talking about. So let's get started as we take a look at how to read the Bible. So the first question is, as we look at this graphic that I've created, is what is the Bible? I would compare it a little bit to like an historic timeline. Now I say this knowing that the Bible is not in chronological order. It's more organized according to types of literature, whether it be wisdom literature or apocalyptic or narrative, historical narrative. There are all sorts of different types of literature, and the Bible is really organized by that. The first 5 books of the Bible, the Pentateuch, are in chronological order, if you will, but then it starts getting, out of order. But I would argue that the Bible is God's view of history. It's his perspective on human history, his take on it, basically. And so I'm comparing it to a historical timeline here. And so this arrow represents history and time itself. And of course, at the very beginning of the Bible, we start with the book of Genesis, which literally means beginnings, okay? And in Genesis, we read about the creation of the world. There's a Jewish term that many of us are familiar with, and it's shalom. Many people translate it to mean peace, but it has a broader, bigger meaning than just peace. Shalom means that all the pieces are there. Everything is in working order. Think of like a brand new Corvette that just comes right off the assembly line, and it is absolutely in perfect working order. All the pieces are there. It is it purrs like a kitten. The engine is flawless. All the bolts and nuts and everything are tightened and well working. That is shalom. And God created the world shalom, in perfect working order, when Adam and Eve came into the picture. Unfortunately, we don't even get past the 3rd chapter of Genesis before Adam and Eve fall into sin. And so sin, unfortunately, wrecks everything. Shalom was broken. And now shalom is a thing of the past. It's a distant memory. But the beauty of this is right in chapter 3 in Genesis, from the very beginning, right after Adam and Eve fall into sin, God puts into play his plan of redemption for the whole world. And so the whole rest of the Bible really is all about God accomplishing that plan of redemption. One of the key factors of God's plan was the people of Israel. And so God's plan was to use Israel to restore the whole world. And it's interesting because God actually says, look, Israel, there's nothing special about you. It's because I'm good and I'm gracious that I've decided to choose you out of the rest of the whole world. And you're going to be my representatives. And I'm going to use you to bring redemption to the world, to free the world from the slavery of sin. So Israel was chosen out of the world for the purpose of reaching the world and redeeming the entire world through God's plan of redemption. And the story of the Old Testament really is the story of this whole plan that God was working out through Israel to bring restoration to the rest of the world. So the New Testament starts with the person of Jesus. And the point of the New Testament is to basically show the fulfillment of everything that the Bible had to say in the Old Testament, which existed in Jesus. And now, of course, you have Jesus, the start of his life, and then eventually you have Jesus on the cross who dies and then is resurrected from the grave, and it obviously tells all that story. Jesus' return will inaugurate kind of the eternal era where he will rule for eternity and eventually take those who have placed their faith and trust in him to heaven to spend eternity with him. Now, everything in the Old Testament points forward to Jesus. So the Old Testament is saying basically, look, he's coming, he's coming, he's coming, Jesus is coming, God's gonna do it, he's gonna provide, he's gonna sacrifice himself for us. Then on the other hand, the New Testament, it looks back and says, see, told you, he came. Remember when we said this? Told you, he came, he did that, he fulfilled what he promised he was gonna fulfill. So in the Old Testament, there were promises and foreshadowings and types of Jesus, as they say theologically. And in the New Testament, you see the actual reality, the substance of what was promised, the fulfillment of what was promised in Jesus. So as we look at the Bible, the thing you want to realize or remember when you look at it as a meta-narrative or big story, really what is at stake in the Bible is the character of God. Who is he? And why does he do the things he does? See, God all throughout the Bible was saying that basically, look, I'm good. I'm really good. You need to trust me. I'm going to provide for your sin. I'm going to restore and redeem you and bring everything back into shalom again. But we see this struggle between God's people, whether it be Israel or even the New Testament Christians. You see the struggle between God's goodness and him trying to prove his goodness and his faithfulness to us doubting him, and instead we take things into our own hands, which we see this all throughout the Old Testament, where God lays out his plan of redemption is very specific with different people throughout history about what he's going to do and why he's going to do it. And yet people doubt his character. They don't trust him. They think he's evil. They think he's bad. Israel, at certain points in the Old Testament, even accuses God of genocide. They say that, God, you're trying to kill us. You're trying to, you brought us out of Egypt. You created us as this nation of Israel. And now you're trying to totally eradicate us. You see this mistrust of God throughout the entire Bible. And yet over and over and over and over again, God comes through. He fulfills his promises. He brings about his plan of redemption with or without the cooperation of his people. And eventually, because of what Jesus does, things will be set right in eternity, that there will be shalom in eternity. And everything will be put back right. God is going to put it back together, and it's going to be just like that Corvette rolling off the assembly line in perfect working order. All the pieces there. There's continuity, there's consistency, and there's harmony, and there's peace. So shalom eventually will be restored in eternity after Jesus returns. Now, let's get a little more personal. Where do you fit in this story? Because here's the reality. Between where Jesus came and rose again and when Jesus is going to return again, you find yourself in that timeline, right in there, in that New Testamental timeline. And as Christian men, we just like Israel, have been called out of the world to be representatives of God and to play a role in his continuing plan of redemption. So we, just like Israel, who have come to faith in Christ, have been chosen out of the world, not because of how good we are, but because of how good God is. And again, the purpose is, just like Israel, is for us to be used then to reach the rest of the world. And that's the point. It's not just you, it's us. See, we're all in this together. You're not alone, okay? So even though you have been called out of the world and been redeemed by Christ as a result of your faith in him, but we have. And so it's us. It's not necessarily you. And it's not just us. It's us. As in, we are now not just one nation under God, pun intended. We are a multinational, multi-ethnic people of God who represent every single nation, tribe, and tongue on the face of the earth. This is the miracle of what God has done through his plan of redemption. And so it's we who are God's representatives in the world. So now the character of God, which has been called into question throughout all of human history, is affirmed through our dependence on him as the only good, righteous, perfect one. And so this is the story of the Bible. The Bible is all about God trying to prove the goodness of who he is to us, his sinful, broken people, and how he wants to restore us. It's his interpretation of human history with regard to his plan for redemption. This is why it's so important to read the Bible on a regular basis, but not just as a manual for life to try to get things out that apply to us specifically or as a self-help book. Instead, we should be losing ourselves in this narrative so that we can truly find our place within the true story that God is telling throughout all of human history. But we have to lay aside our agenda. We have to lay aside ourselves and enter into this broader meta-narrative and allow it to then come back around and define us, wrap itself around us, define us so that we can truly find ourselves in that narrative. So guys, hopefully this helped to understand the Bible a little bit better. Understanding that meta-narrative really helps to bring in perspective the individual stories, which really all come down to sinful, broken people and a holy, righteous God who's trying to redeem them, and our fight with God about whether we trust him or not and whether he's good or not, and him coming through over and over and over and over again, demonstrating his faithfulness to us over and over and over and over again throughout all of human history. That is the story of the Bible, basically. And it culminates and is fulfilled in the person of Jesus, his ultimate sacrifice, where God himself placed himself on the cross to sacrifice himself for us, to prove once and for all his ultimate faithfulness and goodness. I'll attach some links in this video, by the way, that below for other resources that are really, really helpful to understand the Bible. Some of you who are theologians or maybe seminary students, you probably know I missed a ton of stuff. Like, this is a very broad overview, okay? And I'm sure that this is not to everybody's liking. I'm sure maybe you're sitting there thinking, Mike, you missed this. You didn't talk about this. Why didn't you say this? There's a lot of things I could have talked about, I know. But I'm gonna point you to some other resources, some amazing resources. So check out the links below in this video to find out more about that. And again, remember, please subscribe to this video if you'd like to continue on this journey. Remember, the whole point to these videos is for us as Christian men who are striving to live empowered by the light, to walk in the light and allow God's truth to fill us and empower us to live the way he's called us to live. Because we're not gonna do it on our own or on our own power or alone. We need each other. So subscribe to this channel. Feel free to shoot back any or make any notes in the comments section. I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. Thanks for joining me again on this edition of Hatchtags, guys. It was great to be together. And until we see each other again, let's continue to live empowered by the light.